Coming up, Hollywood is on strike. Experts tell us what this means for Indigenous representation and the disruption coming from artificial intelligence. Plus, Bobby Wilson shares more about his role in FX and Hulu's Reservation Dogs. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start today on the West Coast, where millions of dollars in funding are going towards efforts to save fish. Earlier this month, the Department of Commerce and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration received more than $106 million for salmon recovery programs in Alaska and along the West Coast. The Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund comes from both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act to support salmon and steelhead recovery. President Joe Biden set aside $2 billion specifically for fish passage measures across the country as part of his Investing in America agenda. Projects receiving the aid will help recover 28 salmon and steelhead species listed under the Endangered Species Act. Now to New Mexico, where a former U.S. representative and Cherokee Nation citizen is under scrutiny for campaign donations. Yvette Harrell served one term in Congress after she was first elected in 2018. According to reporting by Source New Mexico, Harrell accepted $2,900 in donations from fake elector Deborah Maestas. Maestas, who is a former chair of the Republican Party of New Mexico, was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee last year as a co-conspirator of former President Donald Trump's alleged plan to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The donation Harrell received from Maestas was the maximum contribution allowed for that election cycle. Harrell is running for Congress again in the 2024 election and has received around $400,000 in political contributions this year, according to the latest FEC reports. In Brutus, Michigan, it's hurry up and wait time for the Burt Lake Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. That's after a federal judge granted the Department of the Interior more time on setting new rules for tribes seeking federal recognition. D.C. District Judge Amy German Jackson last week granted Interior another 2 months to act. In July, she had set an August 31st deadline. Current department regulations ban applicants from reapplying for federal recognition if they were once denied. 3 years ago, Jackson called that restriction arbitrary and ordered changes. The case comes from the Burt Lake Band, which was denied federal recognition and, as the rules stand now, cannot re-petition. Well, imagine an Indigenous musician from Peru, flutes, panpipes tradition, or a new form of music that is being created from an Indigenous language and a musical genre from the other side of the world. ICT's Pacey Smith-Garcia has more on this story.
Originating in South Korea, K-pop has been a global phenomenon that has spread into popular culture. In Peru, singer Lennon Tamayo is working to mix this art form with his traditional Quechua language and Andean sounds with his songs.
I am doing Q-pop. The Q stands for Quechua, a language native to Latin America. It has one of the highest percentages of speakers in the region and is an ancient culture, the culture of the Incas. Quechua is my roots, and that's why I use the Q. Instead of the K for Korea, I use the Q for Quechua.
This art form means a lot for Tamayo, who found safety within the K-pop community.
My mother is a singer of Peruvian Andean music, the traditional music of my country. I have embraced my roots since I was a child. Andean music has always been in me. On the other hand, my approach to K-pop was in school. where I suffered from harassment and bullying. In Latin America, being different and having another kind of beauty can be subject to ridicule, so the K-pop community in my classroom gave me a safe space, and I thought, why not transfer this K-pop community experience to the Andean music I listen to at home? That's when I got the idea to do this.
Along with safety, Tamayo and his mother, who also works as manager, have found strength in mixing the traditional with the modern.
Together with my mother, we have gone through many circumstances of inequality and injustice, racism and sexism, all the social conflicts one can imagine. The chapters of life that I have had to write have forged me as a human being. If this human being who is now giving this interview has a solid voice and discourse, it is thanks to what he has lived through.
He hopes that this mixture of the traditional and the modern will inspire others to bring indigenous languages into popular culture.
I would like my story to be known as it emerged. Let it be known that I sing in Quechua and sound like K-pop, that futuristic music. I would like to motivate young people also to embrace their roots and not to see it as a step backward.
In Phoenix, Arizona, Pacey Smith-Garcia, ICT News.
And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. The third and final season of Reservation Dogs is airing now on FX and Hulu. Storylines have introduced to a general audience the dark history of boarding schools as well as the humanity of survival. Actors and writers are not allowed to talk about the show during the Hollywood strike. We'll have more on that shortly, but a few weeks ago, Bobby Wilson talked about this season and his work with the hit show.
Dakota citizen Bobby Wilson is a storyteller. For the hit TV show Reservation Dogs, the poet nicknamed Bobby Dews pulled from the pain and joy of his youth in St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota.
I mean, I grew up in the East Side when I was a teenager. A lot of time, the boys' home that I was sentenced to that I wrote about for Res Dogs was in the East Side. So I spent 2 years in a Ramsey County boys' home right next to the police station. It's so stupid. And she's the only one who's like house we haven't been to. Everybody else, even Willie Jack, we got a whole episode of her and her dad. So it's like I pitched. I was pretty nervous to pitch it because I didn't want it to be like a sad, sad story or sad cheese storyline. And I was so happy and eternally grateful to Sterling when I pitched like Cheese in the Boys' Home. It's like, what if he don't have his parents? Like, what if we don't really even know where they are at? Because that happens to a bunch of Native kids. That happened to me. I didn't know where the hell my parents were for like most of my teen years.
Bobby talked about the show's impact and how every part of the production centered the ways Native people work together.
It ain't my show, and it is everybody who watched its show. It's like what you're saying. That's the goal. And there's like 10 of us on a little council who get to do like philosophize back and forth for a few weeks to come up with those stories and to tell each other's stories and say, I knew like 20 kids like that, growing up or something. It's like everybody had that experience, even if they were on sort of the fringe of it. Everybody knew some kids who were going through that, and like everything that the kids go through in the episode. So we try our best to represent, and I was so freaking touched, man. I got like a bunch of messages afterwards from people who had grown up in like the institutionalized systems, for one reason or the other, ended up, having to ask some housing authority to go on pass, to do whatever, I don't know, go see your friends after school or something. It was such a success in its first season. Critics and audiences loved it on its second season. And for a third season to come through, I mean, really, it's 100% a creative choice. And, I'm not trying to talk, I don't want to talk out of turn on it because it's not my decision. The showrunner, or the guy who led the whole thing, Sterling, it's his, primarily his creative choice. And it makes sense. He called everybody, he talked to us all about it. And, I'm not going to spoil anything about the season, but, it's like, to just keep on going with like the same, I guess, story world, living in that space. It's we don't want to lose the magic and the beauty of that until like let it play out the way that it naturally was, because that's really mostly what we do in the writers' room, is like we're drawing logical conclusions to stories, or like we're moving this thing along, and it's in all its different lines and all the different arcs, and we don't want to keep rebooting like season 4 cheese becomes.
Wilson, who is also an incredible muralist, talked about the flow and the magic they made behind the scenes of Reservation Dogs.
It's a big decision. I mean, there's so much love between everyone who makes it, and it's such a personal thing. And I've seen like like years-long beefs mended on the set of that show, and like there's a magic to it, and it's like all of us wrote that, it becomes so personal, and there's so much that we share with each other in the planning of that story, and then even in the creation of it. Everyone else that comes in, our line producer, all of our different directors that come in and lend their lives and expertise and magic to the set and to the story, to our first ADs, who are arena directors that keep going, and like the magical DP who just all eyes on everything. It's really beautiful, and you want to keep going with that forever. It's really like, could heaven ever be like this? Like and it will again. Like that's really, I think, the wonderful thing is like nobody wanted this show to like devolve into something corny that like is just for the money or for the sake of making it. Like we got to keep making more stuff, and we are. Like everybody in our crew, everybody on our team is doing so much, and I'm just super pumped to see where it goes from here.
And finally, Bobby Wilson, Sasituan Wapetuan citizen and Mainueta relative, gave some advice for Indian country as we all begin the final season of another amazing Indigenous show.
Quit crying around. It's gonna be fine. You see this hat? There's ideas in that hat. And these hands are hands of action.
This is amazing, but I don't know if my dad is that into pickles.
What kind of native rapper ain't into pickles?
You don't have anything more like a hardcore rapper would wear?
Like a spicy pickle?
In Bismarck, North Dakota, Vincent Moniz, ICT News.
Hollywood is on strike, and that walkout ranges from Reservation Dogs to projects that have yet to be produced. At a recent ICT forum in Santa Fe, DeLanna Studi talked about the strike and its impact on the Indigenous community.
How many of you have heard of the strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike? How many of you have heard of the WGA strike? Aha, okay. So WGA started first. We joined in to support them. And basically it's the right to earn equal pay, to be honest. It's to get paid for what we're worth. It's also to have control of our own image. So I can't really talk too much about what's going on in the negotiations, and I can't really speculate too much or share. So all the opinions I'm sharing are that of DeLanna Studi individual. Basically, we want to be able to control our image and to get paid for the work that we do. There was a time when actors, especially on the streaming platforms, before streaming happened, there were times when actors would do a movie and they would get residuals, and that would help them into retirement. Even after they quit acting, they would still be able to qualify for health and pension because of those residuals. Because of streaming and the way the streaming contracts are now worded, we don't get residuals from those. Or the residuals that we do get they're really pennies on the dollar if we're lucky. And so a lot of our actors, you'll hear stories, if you're following the strike, you'll hear stories on Instagram and Facebook from actors that are pretty well known, that have done major television shows for like Netflix or Hulu, who are risking of losing their homes because now they don't have any money.
Joining us now is ICT's Mark Trahant. DeLanna Studi talked about what's driving this strike, how different it is, and what some of the implications are for Indigenous writers and actors. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Aaliyah. Imagine getting a job as an extra on a Hollywood film. You might work for a week and then be on screen for just minutes or seconds. But many in Hollywood have a different vision. Using artificial intelligence, an actor would go into the studio, be scanned, and then an artificially created actor would be in the shot. One day of scan time and a lot less work for the actor. That's one of the issues driving this strike. Turns out there's a lot of history. I sat down with Liza Black, author of Picture Indians, Hollywood Native Americans in Film, 1941 through 1960.
You know, film history is pretty fascinating because Native people were part of the film industry from the very beginning, you know, going back to the late 19th century. Some of the first moving images included Native people. So Native people have always been part of the film industry. But what has changed a lot is how the industry has organized itself in terms of labor. So in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, there was less of a hierarchy. There was more opportunities for all kinds of people to be involved in the film industry, including Native people. And some of that has been documented by Michelle Rahasia and Joanna Hearn, showing how you had folks who were from Native communities writing, acting, directing films prior to, say, the Great Depression. After those years, though, you see a tremendous amount of hierarchy being introduced into Hollywood in terms of extras, in terms of these, you know, gradations of categories of actors, supporting actors, bit players, and the tremendous class distinctions between those folks of people and how much they got paid. And so when you brought this into what some of us call Indian country, you know, when studios visited reservations and hired Native people on reservations, that same pay structure got imposed onto Native people. The continuity I see there is that, yes, streaming has allowed corporations, meaning places like Netflix and Hulu, to make a lot of money off of a hit show or movie by streaming it kind of endlessly. The continuity, though, is that even in the period I'm looking at, which is more the mid-20th century, the 1940s and the 1950s, you could have a situation where a star didn't quite get much pay for a particular film or television series that ends up doing well, right? Because actors are paid according to how they think a product will do. So the actor negotiates their contract before they do the work. They do the work, then the work is released. They've already been paid at that point. So they may have been paid far less than how the movie did. And that's what you see today sort of being exaggerated because streaming allows for such a massive audience if a film or television show finds an audience.
One of the fun stories in your book that I thought was fascinating is how instead of a union, it was the Bureau of Indian Affairs negotiating a contract at one point.
Yes, you see this in a few cases, especially with the Navajo reservation, where the Bureau of Indian Affairs is involved in these negotiations, and Navajo women trying to get involved in that and make their own play for what they wanted, which of course got swept aside in the end. But yeah, you had the Bureau of Indian Affairs right in there, you know, corresponding with studios like Warner Brothers and RKO. Right. I mean, I think people should be thinking about how historic it is, this moment we're in right now, where you have the well-paid portion of Hollywood siding with the lower paid or severely underpaid workers in Hollywood. That's historic. And I think people interested in Native representation should be thinking about how can Native people become part of this conversation about challenging the inequities in Hollywood, as well as the underrepresentation of Native people in Hollywood.
This moment in history, I mean, in a way, it's unique in the sense that you have so many folks getting representation for the first time with really mainstream productions, and Res Dogs would be a great example of that. Does that change the equation at all for the union role?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that this is going to sound just so terrible, but it's what I truly believe. I think that moment, that Res Dogs and Rutherford Falls movement is over. I think that those works were in the pipeline prior to the global protests in 2020 against police violence. But I really feel that the studios only greenlighted those projects, truly greenlighted them, really funded them, really got it going and put it out there because of 2020. And we've already seen that Rutherford Falls got canceled and Res Dogs is also coming to a close. So Res Dogs had a longer run than Rutherford Falls, but I don't feel optimistic that Hollywood is going to continue with where they were going. I worry that they gave Native people the attention they've been screaming for centuries, and that moment has come to an end because white audiences aren't demanding it the way they were in 2020 and 2021.
Last question, do you think this will go on a long time?
I do. I do think this will go on a long time because I think the streaming feels so very different to people. I think this really sort of increases the sense of injustice. And I think that there's a really strong degree of outrage at corporations like Netflix and Hulu, but also we're just seeing a lot of strikes in a lot of sectors. So I think the mood has changed in America. I really do. And I think workers are fed up. So I think that they're not going to bow down to any concessions made by the studios anytime soon.
Liza Black, thank you.
My goodness, Mark, I'm so struck that so many of these strikes go far beyond Hollywood. They actually reach into AI.
And generative artificial intelligence is one of those things that's really going to change everything. And you think just about the impact on Hollywood. Storytelling has always been impacted by technological changes. A great example of that is when talking movies came out. They used to have large orchestras, and all those orchestras lost their jobs because suddenly movies had soundtracks. Multiply that times several factor, and you're seeing what AI will do. And one for Indigenous communities that's terrifying is that Hollywood could go in and take a look at all of the reports from all of the anthropologists in history and make up ceremonies for movies and have them constructed artificially with no one saying, you can't do that.
Beyond Hollywood, what are some of the other issues with AI that you're seeing right now?
Well, with all technologies, there's always pluses and minuses. On the plus side, one that would be extraordinary would be to plug in all of the data about missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives and be able to have the computer search through all the files and come up with ways of categorizing things in real time much faster than we can do now. That's a plus sign. On the downside is the ability to have our AI create news stories and have it saying, here's your script for tomorrow, it's all done, right when you walk in the door.
We know that right now lawmakers are feeling a lot of pressure because there are very few regulations around AI, but what are you hearing in that regard?
Well, both lawmakers and tribal governments. I mean, this is also an issue for tribal governments to define what they own and what the intellectual property is that's owned by Indigenous people, and how to put that into the discourse is really important.
I think so many people hear about AI and they get really frightened. Can this technology be stopped?
It's really hard to stop any new technology. I mean, you're already seeing it in very simple things like autonomous cars. In fact, one thing going on in San Francisco right now that's really fascinating is there's a group trying to stop AI cars from driving around San Francisco. And they're doing that by placing orange cones in front of the cars. And the cars cannot navigate when there's an orange cone there. So people are fighting back, but it's very difficult because it reduces costs so much that companies are saying, we got to do this.
So do you think that this is something that tribal governments should be looking at and seeing, how do we harness this power? Or on the flip side, how do we avoid being exploited by something like AI?
Both questions are essential, and tribal governments can look for ways to be more efficient. Maybe it's with farming. There are lots of ways that you could use this as a tool, but at the same time being very protective of intellectual property and saying this is something we own and we need to keep it out of public discourse. There are things we know that are so sacred that should never be public, and that's going to be really important in this age.
Have you seen any reporting or any other further information that our viewers can find on AI, specifically in Indigenous communities or relating to Native people?
It's just starting to have a conversation. And we've seen how slow it's been to have a conversation in Indian communities about data and the primacy of data. And this is just an extension of that. So it's starting, but it's behind in terms of both the law and the application of the technology.
Well, Mark, I know that this is a conversation around AI that we'll continue to have for many, many years, but thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.